Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, more mods for the Micro B, and these are the GPM LMB089-B. So these are the A block, Bulkhead, and then C and D block I believe. I think the back ones should be pretty easy to fit. The front ones, we're going to be stripping most of this, so again we're messing around with these little ball screws on front. But it shouldn't be too bad. But let's bring in for a close-up look and see how we get on with this one. First off, let's have a look what we get with these. We do have some little sealer bags, and these come in really handy. So we've got, first off, what looks to be the C block. So I think that's going to go around that position. Then we've got the D block, which integrates the rear bumper, and again, pretty nice looking. That'll go on rear. Then we have our front A block, which that's going to fit around there, just behind the bumper. And then we've got this lovely little bit, which will fit directly on the chassis. And I think the only reason we have to strip all this top down is for two of the screws, the other two coming from the bottom. But yeah, let's crack on with this and see how we get on. So I think let's take the body shell off. So first off, I'm going to attempt to get down to the bulkhead. So I think we're going to be using the 050 driver, and we're going to want these two long screws out, and these are just the two screws right in the front of this bulkhead, and they're the two longer ones, so we're definitely going to have to get both of them out. Then we're going to have to pop off our front links, and also our suspension from the tower. Then we have the lovely task of getting these little things out. So we're going to want to unscrew this one and this one. So I'll get them unscrewed because they're a bit of a pain, and then we can carry on. So we've now got the two little ball studs removed, and then we can carefully take off the bulkhead. And we just need to lift the steering up now. Watch your little pins. So you will have these tiny little pins for your steerer, and we can remove both them. Then that gets us down to what we're looking for. So we have these two tiny little screws, and these should be the 050. So we can undo these. Just pop these to one side, keep them safe. Don't drop them on your carpet because you'll never find them again unless you go sweeping round with a magnet. Definitely something that's worth keeping to hand when you're working on these tiny little micro RCs. Then we can flip over the RC and then onto the bottom, and I've no idea why Losi decided to do this, but these are going to be 1.5mm. So we're going to have to remove two of these, and these are little tapered head screws. The top screws that we've just removed, they're both ball head, so it's easy to not get these mixed up. So now you want to lift this up, and it just levers out of these two holes. Then we can flip the RC over, and you've got one more screw that's revealed, and this again we switch into the 050. So we can remove that little screw. Then we can just carefully drop this off, and then you've got your two little pins that you need to remove. So you can, if you want, remove the links to steering. So you can remove these or remove the one off at servo, but you don't need to get this off. just need to remove the pin, and then we've got our original plate. So we take that out, position your new one the same. Then we can get this into position. We can drop one pin in. I'm doing my best to get this on camera for you. So we then get the second one lined up. And we can get that back in. And then this all slides underneath the RC, and these two little sort of locating humps, they go into place. Then we need a 050 driver, and we can start to fasten this back down. So I find it easier just to get one started. Then we need our second ball head or domed head screw. And this will go into the hole at the side of it. And then I wouldn't tighten them all the way down, we're just using them to keep everything in place. Then we need a little domed head screw out of the original A block. So you can drop that back in. You can get this in place on the RC, and it just clips over the top. The only reason I say leave the back ones loose is because sometimes it can be a little bit fiddly to get this in place and make sure it's sat down. So then we're back to our 050 driver, and you just want to screw that down till it's snug. Once you've got that in, you should be good to tighten these back up. And don't over tighten them. Although these GPM parts are really well machined and everything seems to fit very good, you're still working with tiny little threads. So once we've got them in place, let's get the arms and that out of the way. So then we've got as tiny little pins for the steering, and we're going to drop these in. We're then going to get a second pin in, and then you're just going to drop your steerer with the bearings fastened to your Ackerman plate back over the top. So we can see the suspension arms are now really free. So that is what you're looking at getting. Then we're going to need to drop the top mount with a shock tower back in position, and you're just going to have to wiggle this around until you get both the pins lined up. So you just need to make sure that both your locating pins on the rear of this are down. Then you want the longer screws that you removed, and we're going to need the 050 driver again, and we're going to get these screwed back in. And again, as you're screwing these in, just go really gentle. Now for me, it does seem slightly easier to get the front of this bulkhead lined up first and get your little pins in that go into your steerer. Once you get them in, you can clip these two back pins down. They've got locating lugs on them, and just nip these up finger tight, because it would be very easy to strip these. And make sure this plate is sat all the way down, that way you know your two little pins behind here are in right. Then we've got the lovely tedious task of swapping these back in. So we need to screw both these down. I would get them started with your fingers first, because there's far less chance of stripping the threads or cross threading them, and then just nip them up with your tiny little nut driver once you've got them screwed into place. And if I can manage to do this with my hands that are bigger than the entire RC, anybody else should have an easy time getting these screwed in. I would definitely, before you're thinking of working on one of these RCs, I would get yourself the proper X drivers and the proper nut drivers. But also, I think a really good investment, and I'm waiting for them to arrive. I'd have liked them to be here to start with, would be the Endura full ball set that gives you a tiny little hex drive on top of all these ball nuts. But don't over tighten these. Then we just need to clip our suspension back on so we can get his top arms back in place, we can get his shocks back in place, and that is our front bit all fastened in. The last thing we need to do is get the bumper put on. Now there's some parts on here that I'm definitely going to hold off from modifying to aluminium. This little bumper would be one of them, because for me, if you're going to get something scratched up, I'd rather it be a very cheap plastic bumper. It's not really going to do anything structurally for you, and it's questionable whether I'd actually change the arms. One thing I would like to clear up on, especially on these GPM parts, is these little screws. So I've seen people have issues where on the Endura ones, these screws will screw all the way in and go tight. On the GPM, these two screws and also the top two, they do stop before they're actually screwed down, so you don't have a problem with your steering tightening up. So they do fit, same as the stock ones. Not sure if that's something that was overlooked on the Endura, but I've seen a few people saying when they fitted the Endura caster blocks and C-hubs, these screws then screwed all the way down and it nipped up the steering. It's not a problem I've run into with the GPM parts, but we've now got the A block and the sort of centre bulkhead. That is all now aluminium. So next off, we're going to move on to fitting the rear parts and see how we get on with them. So for this part, we have the D block and C block, and these are going to make up the rear bumper as well. So these shouldn't be too difficult. So I'm going to start off with the RC upside down. We've got these 4 little screws, and again these really cheap aluminium and magnetic parts trays really do make working on this kind of thing so much easier. So first off, we're going to get all 4 of these removed, and I'm not thinking this is going to be too difficult. So our rear assembly we should be able to slide off. We should then just be able to ease out the C block. So this is going to fit on that way, and we're going to put this in to replace it. So this is going to be the first bit we slide into place, and if you just get the lugs so they line up with the chassis, we should then be able to position our wheels and arms on. Just be careful that, like on this one, we don't lose a drive shaft. So that's one in. Just need to lift this drive shaft up because that's decided to escape. If they do pop out, you should just be able to spin your wheel and get it back in. So we've got 2 in place, then we can slide on our D block. And then we get it all into place. We should just be able to screw this down. Again, you could use thread lock on any of these. I'm going to try it without first, because a lot of my touring cars are all aluminum or aluminium parts, and I've not used thread lock on any of those, and up to now I've not had a problem with things falling off or backing out. especially with these being such tiny little screws. If you've got thread lock on, there's every chance that you're going to start stripping threads when you try and back them out, or you could end up with the heads rounding off, which is not going to be a good time. But all we need to do is nip these up, and you don't want to be over tightening these because you will strip the threads on either the part or the actual RC itself. But they've all gone back in pretty nice. Let's just have one more try, make sure they're all tight. So they're all screwed on as drive shafts are in. So we've now got the A block. Whether you'd call that B block usually sits back here. It's more of a bulkhead, but we've got A block, bulkhead, C block and D block. We've got as hubs, as caster blocks, as rear hubs, as Ackerman and as steering, all in place. So yeah, looking quite a funky little RC. Quite impressed with how they fit. Doesn't look like it affects the geometry in any bad way or anything. And these will definitely be a lot stronger than the stock parts. I haven't seen anyone complaining of breaking these parts yet, but I have seen a few caster blocks and hubs being broken. But up to now, not seen anything with these. But I know on bigger RCs, these can break, especially if you take a bit of a rough crash, and seems though we've took a brushed car and made it brushless. And we're probably going to gear this up. The impacts are going to be higher speed. So as for the arms, I'm going to try and leave these plastic to start with, just because it's nice to have a bit of flex left in somewhere. But we do have quite a few other mods that I'm going to do on this RC. So as we've been stripping all this down, what I'm going to do now is take the bigger bag that we got with these parts. I'm going to drop all my spares into there so we can keep everything together. And we know these are all spares for the Micro B. And as I say, I'm definitely going to be getting another one of these to compare a fully modded, if you like, to a fully stock once we get the some track time. But that's the LMB089, and these are the B, the blue parts, fitted to the Losi Micro B. So let's wrap this one up. So there we have it, the GPM LMB089-B. I think they list it as the bulkhead and rear mount, but they do all fit nice. We've had no issues with screw fitment, no issues with how anything lines up with the rest of the stock parts, which I've said earlier in the videos for this. I'm just interested in how we can mix and match these parts, and if you do need the other GPM parts to make them fit. So far, every single part we've fitted, it's managed to go back in place with the rest of the stock parts, and there's been no weird issues, no binding. No problem with suspension. It's not binding that up either. So yeah, so far it looks like with all the GPM parts we've fitted, there's no issues. The fitment is exactly the same, especially with these screws, the OD kingpin screws. You can tighten them down and it doesn't lock the actual suspension or steering, so that's nice. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching Wtf Rc Cars. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and if you want to see what else we bolt to this thing, catch you guys again in the next one.